Hey guys, well, welcome to the Noble Man Podcast. I am excited to be here for another episode, and I've got a really cool guest. Billy Cole is the men's ministry leader at Parkway on the Mountain. Parkway Church has a number of names there in Roanoke, but most often we hear Parkway Church on the Mountain, and it's iconic in the community. So, actually, Billy was just at our Roanoke Men's Conference, and so we want to talk about that a little bit. But welcome to the show, Billy Cole. I'm glad you're here.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Mike.
It's great fun. So tell us a little bit about yourself. I know married, you've got kids, and so give us that, and then we'll get into how you got into investing in men and what that looks like.
Oh, well, thanks. So I am married. My wife's name is Karen. She's definitely my better half, and I definitely outkicked my coverage there. We have 4 kids. So we have a son named Carter. We have a daughter named Gray. Carter's 25. Gray is almost 21. Riley is 19. She's our other daughter. And then our youngest daughter, Eva, will be 17 in June. So 4 kids, 3 girls, getting towards the end. Well, not the end of the road, but a different phase of life for us. So.
Well, you know, that's interesting because my wife and I have 4 kids as well. We have 3 boys and a girl. So our oldest 3 are boys, and then we've got the girl, and we're a little bit ahead of you, probably about 5 years ahead of you, because ours are 30, 26, 24, maybe 27, 25, and then 21. So ours are a little bit further ahead age-wise. And what we are learning, Stacy and I, is that there's not a lot of help out there for parenting adult children. This is a new phase of life for us, and we continue to learn and lean into the Lord and each other with things that we didn't know to expect here. So are you guys experiencing that as well?
It's a different dynamic. For sure, it's a different dynamic. There's less. It's hard giving up the reins as far as, guiding in a heavier way and kind of letting them go out and make mistakes. We read a book one time in a life group that we're in, and I think the title, if I'm not wrong, is it was geared towards parenting adult children. It was something like "Keep your door open and your mouth shut," or something was along the lines of the title.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
It was a good book. So, but yeah, I mean, just a new phase, but still fun and still good, but challenging, just like every phase is when you go into a new one. So.
Amen. But what we've said is there's all kinds of books about being parents of newborns. Not much resourcing out there for this phase, it doesn't seem. So
because by the time you get to this phase, you're too tired to write books.
I guess so.
And too broke.
Oh, that's awesome.
They need you less, but it's more expensive when they need you at this point, right? So
absolutely. Hey, well, so tell me, you are sold out to investing in men, and I love your heart to see men walk with Christ and lead well. That's part of the mission of Noble Warriors. Our mission statement is we serve churches as they equip men to walk with Christ and lead well. So you're passionate about being part of that with the men in your church and even beyond in the community. So what in your story, tell us about your story and how that gives you a passion to invest in men and helping them come to know Christ and walk with him.
Yeah, I'd love to share that. It's something that has definitely been laid on my heart. I don't think I fully understand like a lot of things that I think the Lord lays on our hearts. I always get directed back to the verse where he talks about being a lamp unto your feet. And to me, that means that like if you picture a physical lamp by your feet, it's a pretty small area that's lit in the darkness, right? So what he calls us to do is take a step, and then that you can see a little bit more. And I think that's definitely been my story with men's ministry. I'm a relatively new believer in Christ in regard to my age. I'm almost 50 years old, but I was baptized 5 years ago.
Wow.
I didn't grow up in church. My mom tried really hard to push us to go to church. My dad was kind of resistant to it, to be honest with you. I don't know the reason for that. We've never, frankly, had the discussion. It's just he didn't want to go. If we went, we were going with mom alone. So that was a lot of days of my brother and I sneaking in early in the morning and unplugging their alarm clock on Sunday morning because, dad didn't want to go, so we didn't want to go, right? And I think maybe part of that is my dad's father died when he was 2. And so maybe he didn't have that male leadership in his life that demonstrated that to him, but it definitely had a consequence on my life. It gave me an excuse not to want to go to church, if you will. It's not his fault. That's a choice I made, but it gave it some backing. I've never not believed in God. I prayed when I was in trouble, just like everybody else. I believed that there was God, but I really didn't know what it was to surrender my life and walk
Sure.
with him. And once I did, things began to change. A year ago, I probably would have told you that my interest in men's ministry was piqued by, we were splitting time between Charlotte and Roanoke. I had owned a medical laboratory. I'd sold it to a company in North Carolina, and I was running part of Western North Carolina for them. And we were every other week back and forth to Charlotte. We had a place there, so we were attending a church down there when we were down there, and then we were attending Parkway when we were down here. And they had a men's ministry there, and I went to some of their events, and it didn't feel like I felt in, and I had this urge as I was getting deeper in my walk with Christ to have godly friends and to have men that I felt fed me and I fed them, and we sharpened one another, and I had just this hunger for it. And so circumstances changed. We ended up getting called back to Virginia full time, and I talked with our pastor Dustin at that point, and I was like, hey, this is something that's in me. It's in my heart. We had kind of a fledgling men's ministry at that time, and I really wanted to help it grow. So
Right.
A year ago, that probably would have been my story. I think as the veil has kind of been pulled back about it's something so innate in me that I can't not do it if I didn't want to. It frustrates me at all ends at some point, but it's something that burns inside me. And I think part of that is understanding the story about my dad, and how that impacted my children because they weren't in church. So I've seen some of the struggles that they've gone through. And as a father, I don't know how you don't carry guilt about that.
Wow.
If I'd have had them in church, would some of the struggles have been different for them? So, and then, fast forward, last month, Eva and I, my 17-year-old, we were in Guatemala on a missions trip, and we were in a couple villages there in the south part of Guatemala, and they have, a big problem with men not being in the church. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is some are just resistant. Two is that a lot of the men have had to leave the villages to go find work with the intent of wanting to send money back to their families, but they end up leaving and starting new families, right? We get distracted, they take off. So again, that reinforced it. And I got a chance to actually sit and talk with the men that were in the church and talk about men's ministry, about the importance of it, how it's changed my life. And praise God, they're actually meeting on Wednesday nights now.
Wow. In Guatemala.
Yeah. So, it's just something in me. I want to create an environment where men have support, men have people for accountability. I just want to take this initiative that God has given me and glorify Him to the best of my ability. Sorry, that makes me emotional.
That's incredible, Billy. Wow. Well, it's real. I mean, that's part of what it's for you to say to your pastor, it's in me, and I can't imagine not doing it because it is such a integral part of my DNA. That's a big deal. And man, I love to see when God brings us to a place of emotion because we are sold out for what He's doing. So your kids have seen a change in your life, and so that testimony has to be significant. I know they still may be struggling with decisions and challenges and things like that, but do they recognize a difference in your life, and do they speak to that at all? That's part of the testimony I've heard from some folks who were teenagers or so when their dads came to faith. They see, behold, he's now a new creation. It's 2 Corinthians 5:17. The old is gone, and the new has come. So how did those conversations go with your kids?
I mean, it's been good. I specifically, they've all got a chance to see me get baptized, which was one of the positives, to get baptized later in life. I often look back and go, man, how much different my life would have been if I'd have known the Lord for a longer portion of it. I've seen, 3 of my 4 children are saved. So all three, sorry, all three since I was saved. So you can see, how the impact comes. We've got one out there that we're still praying for.
Yeah.
So like I mentioned, Eva and I, we got to go to Guatemala together. I got to watch her minister to young girls and teenagers
Wow.
and talk about her testimony. She's overcome some tough stuff to be 17 years old. And watching her minister to, 60 girls in middle school in
Mm,
Guatemala that don't have a lot of hope and don't have a lot of choice in life, it was pretty awesome as a dad.
yeah. Now, so you came to faith. Did you come to faith before your wife, or did she come to faith first, or was there some men who spoke to you, or how did your conversion take place?
Yeah, so my wife actually, this is our second marriage for both of us. We
Hmm.
both went through a divorce, earlier in our lives. And, I remember one of the first questions Karen asked me when we were dating was, "Well, what do you think about God?" And I told her exactly what I told you earlier. I believe in God, I pray when but I wasn't actively going to church. And I had really no idea of what surrendering to Christ meant. Um, I would often be in church. We went to Parkway for 8 years before we really got plugged in. We went to a new friends party and everybody's like, "Oh, I've been here 2 months. I've been here a year." And we're like, "We've been here 8 years." Um, so it was a little bit embarrassing, but that's when things really started to take off for us. But she was really patient with me.
Yeah.
She would gently nudge. She would, but it was never like, she kind of let me figure it out. I mean, I had this, we would go to church and we'd sit in things and they'd be talking about stories out of the Bible and they'd be talking about stuff. And I felt like I was at, the wrong book club or showed up at book club having read the wrong book. Like I didn't have the
Yeah.
background knowledge. So that made me feel a little bit defeated and a little bit distant. So one of the first things that happened, I was like, I'm just going to read the Bible from start to finish. Like
Yeah.
I've got to acquire some knowledge because something, but she was patient, but she was supportive and she kept pushing. She gave her life to Christ early in her life. She's an amazing, patient woman, very patient, but she just, she supported me as I took steps forward, but she never like beat me over the head with it,
Yeah.
or anything like that. So.
Wow. Well, that's just incredible story, and thanks for sharing that and for being vulnerable with the emotion, because
Yeah.
guys need to see that this gets to our inner core. I mean,
Yeah.
this is real stuff. So let me shift gears a moment. Just about 2 weeks ago, you came and brought some men to one of our conferences. It was hosted by Fincastle Baptist Church. We had
Yep.
thought at one time it might be at Parkway,
Yep.
but you brought a group of guys, and I think you had a pretty positive experience there. So talk about what that day was like and what your experience was there as a guy being able to sit and just soak up what the Lord was teaching you that day.
Yeah, I mean, it was like I mentioned to you, earlier. It was an awesome conference. I've had the opportunity to go to 3 or 4 different types of conferences through 3 or 4 different people that host them. And what I really enjoyed about Noble Warriors, and first of all, we had, I think we had like 10 guys from our group, and we had gotten a chance to spend some time together talking, prior to the conference. So I felt like I had a good idea of what you guys were about. But one thing I really enjoyed about the conference is that, when I go to something like that, I like to feel like I'm going to work on something, right? It almost feels like one of our Monday night men's groups where it didn't feel like a production. It didn't feel like it was impersonal. I felt that all the speakers, it was down to earth, common sense type stuff. It was like we were going in there, rolling up our sleeves with a bunch of our buddies and trying to figure out how to get better. I enjoyed your
Right.
story about 20 years in this ministry. Every breakout, there was probably 4 sessions that I wish I could have attended during the same hour, but you had to pick
Right.
one. I also like the fact that there was the opportunity left where, when we dismissed from a session, it wasn't like we had to be in the next session in 5 minutes. It allowed time for us to kind of digest and talk with the people that we were there with and other people in the conference and really understand kind of delve into what we've got and talk about what we experienced. I had a chance to talk to all of my guys and be like, hey, which breakout did you go to? And, what was the thing that you got most out of it? We had some guys that had some
Right.
really impactful experiences, and probably one of the most crucial things that I picked up was your right next step plan, which is what I love. So when you're in a session, when you're hearing something, it's great to like take, and I'm a note taker, but it's great to actually put something down that's like, this is how I'm going to implement this. This is what I took away. And this is a concrete example of how I'm going to implement this in my life. And then also tell somebody about it so that they can help hold me accountable. That was invaluable to me.
Yeah.
As a men's ministry leader, your session in the afternoon, what was invaluable because, like you said, I think a lot of times we get caught up in, there's a lot of these resources. How are we, what kind of cool things are we doing to, learn more about the Lord with these guys? But there needs to be a strategic plan to get men in the word and then create disciples. So it kind of helped me focus on, doing some great things in Monday Men at Parkway. And I'm grateful for the level of humbleness and vulnerability and conversation that we have every Monday night. But I also think we can turn the volume up a little bit, and there's some things that we can do to go a little deeper and be more intentional. So that was what I took away from the conference. It was just an amazing experience.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned the part about the right next step, because part of what I hope you see going on as a men's ministry leader is that we're really trying to model a lot of elements that you could employ locally. And so that whole idea of making sure you always give guys, you specifically speak about what are you doing with this and what's the right next step for you to take. That's us trying to model for guys like you. What do I do in the local church? Because we do have a tendency to just go and see, but we never process so that we know what is next and we put what we learn into action. And so that's a big deal. I appreciate you bringing that up. What were some of the things that your guys had takeaway comments about?
One of our Monday Men guys, John, he really connected with Don Sunshine and his messages about evangelism. And he's actually trying to work with him to get him to come to Parkway and do some stuff with us there. So that was taken away. We had, one guy out of our group that's really struggling in his marriage right now. And he went to one of the marriage one in the afternoon, and that really hit home with him and gave him some next steps. I mean, it was across the board. Everybody had at least one or two things that really hit them, and that they're like, I'm going to do this. And we've talked about it. We've talked about it on Mondays. We've talked about it, later that day as well. So, we're actually running through Point Man as a group starting this coming Monday. So I let them all know that we're going through this. And, we've got 25 guys that are, have all bought books and they're ready to roll. So we're going to break up into small groups so we can discuss it a little bit more efficiently, but we're going for it.
That's awesome. I love that resource. As a matter of fact, we'll have to stay in touch because I'd love to come one Monday night and hang out with you guys and hear the conversation. That would be a blast.
We'd love to have you. We'd love to have you. So they've got to read the chapter and answer the questions before they come. And we're going to break up into smaller, subsections and really go deep with it. And we've got guys in our group that are 24, unmarried, no children.
Yep.
And we've got guys that are 73, grandparents many times over at this point. So my point with them with going through that book is this is about creating disciples, and you've got somebody to disciple and lead your life no matter what age you are. And for the young fellows that are, don't have families and wives yet, this will prepare you to be a better husband and a better father. And I mean, they were gung ho. I expected more resistance than what I got. So they're ready to roll. So.
Okay. So that's an interesting thing that you say there, because I have expected resistance at times from guys that I was trying to take further down the road. And of late, for guys that I have personal relationships with that I say, hey, we're going here, will you go with me? There has been little resistance. Their posture has been, yeah, if you'll get out in front and lead us and show us the way, then we want to go with you. And so I think that's valuable for us to hear as men, that God's design is for us to lead. And so even other guys around us are looking for direction so that then they can go and lead their own families. I mean, we're just trying to multiply the kingdom through developing men as leaders in their homes and the church.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like you said, you expect to get some resistance, and a clear example of that was when I was in Guatemala. They asked me to talk about men's ministry with these men that were in the villages, and that were the few men that were coming to the church. And I'm like, these guys are farmers and welders,
Yep.
and like their life is so dramatically different than mine. They don't have running water or electricity. Like
Right.
I was intimidated because I was literally like, these guys live a very serious life with serious consequences and hardships. And I'm talking about sitting around with guys talking about your feelings and all these. I was like, but they were just as hungry. The crazy thing was
Yeah.
they were just as hungry. I mean, I saw tears. I mean, I shed tears. Just the desire to want to do that. And then they're like, look, we're starting that this Wednesday. And I just heard from the pastor, last week, they're still meeting. So it's something that I think men are universally hungry for. And that's,
Yeah.
glory to God for that, for sure. So.
Well, and it is exactly glory to God because it's his design, because I don't think there is a guy who doesn't want to be better. And we can wrestle around with what the definition of better looks like, but when we put Christ out there as the model and he is the example of what a godly man looks like, then all of a sudden we've got a clear target to shoot at. And so that helps us tremendously. Now, you came back after the conference and had lunch with your pastor, Dustin, and had a conversation with him about what you experienced, what that looked like. So talk about that whole idea as a men's ministry leader in the local church, your relationship with your pastor, and what your comments were, and then what his response was about all of this.
Yeah, so I mean, first and foremost, Dustin is an amazing champion for men's ministry. A year and a half ago, when I sat down with him about this, he expressed a desire for it to be a greater role in our church, to be more consistent. And so far we've been able to, through God, been able to do that. He's a champion for men. He's a champion for freedom in general, for, our group, freedom from any type of vice or, any chains that are holding us down. So it was important to me because, he had expressed an interest in us kind of champion a conference, pick a conference and let's champion. As we talked about, the goal was to have that at Parkway, and we were double booked. And, I'm hoping that we can get you guys back to Parkway at some point as well. But, I felt like I needed to kind of report back to him and let him know what a great experience it was. And that, some of my exact words were, I told him, I said, you come out on stage, and I don't remember if it was the first time you came out or the second time, but you were talking about the history of the ministry and 20 years and all these different things. And I told him, I said, my first response was, I'm just so grateful, this is here. And it's so grateful for these 350 guys that are sitting in here. There's just something about a large group of men sitting there praising the Lord and wanting to get better. It's beautiful. And I said, my second response was almost like a visceral jealousy. Like I got hot. I got like tears, and I was like, man, to be able to wake up and that be my job, to get up and do men's ministry and further advance that, I can't even imagine what a blessing that would be. And I know it's difficult. I'm not saying I think it's easy, but man, what a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So, we talked about, the same takeaways that I told you, about the conference and how I think it impacted our men, and how I think, what it made me think is in terms of strategy of how to, pick a little deeper direction for some of our groups, but also how it could apply to some of the other men's groups and Parkway men in general, in some of our events and things of that nature. So, Dustin and I stay in close contact about men's ministry. I give him updates all the time. He asks about updates all the time. And, one of the things that he reported back is that, you can see what the men being engaged and leading their families and has done in our church. I walk in on Sundays, and, I've got, there's new guys serving as greeters or on the safety team, or they're on stage in the worship band. Like it seems like every week. And it's just, not to mention the baptisms and all those different things, but it's impacting our church, which means it'll impact our community. And he was very glad to hear about it. He knows that I'm a big fan of Noble Warriors. And I told him, I said, look, if I were going to plan a men's conference, I can't imagine it looking a lot different than what you guys did, and that's a cool thing. Like if I could create one
Yeah.
from scratch, and I was like, hey, this is what I'm going to do. I don't think it'd look a lot of different than what I experienced in Fincastle
Wow.
2 Saturdays ago. So,
Well,
that was
that's
my report
encouraging.
back to him.
I appreciate that. Let me ask you this. What else, from the perspective of a men's ministry leader, what do you think? Give me some advice about what my right next step should be to engage more guys like you at churches across the valley, across the state. I mean, when you think about, man, if I just had some help with this or that, it would be a blessing to me in my position as a men's ministry leader. So give me some wisdom and some instruction about how to help you do better be more effective in your work as a men's ministry leader at your church.
Well, I think first and foremost, you've already done that with some of your, with your session, and, Will's session was fantastic. I listened to him talking about having 200 or 300 guys on Wednesday nights for a men's service. And I was like, wow, that would be so amazing. Like, I can't even imagine. But anyways, I think as far as like the strategic planning and the direction, you gave some really good advice about like, video, book, in the word, kind of mixing up our approach to different things, the right next steps. I think a lot of times at these conferences, you go to them and a fire's kind of lit. Sometimes maybe, you don't stick to it and stuff gets lost in life, but I've already seen us implement things that we learned. So I think for me as a men's ministry leader, what would be valuable is, and I know that you guys are spread thin and all that stuff, but some workshops for guys to attend so that we can kind of, increase the number of touches, or even if it's just for us to come over to your side of the state and come to do some stuff so that we can continue that, that onus can be on us as well. But just to keep fanning the flame, providing resources and opportunities for us to take that spark that was lit and just turn it into an inferno. So,
an inferno, that'd be a great name for a follow-up event. Moving from a spark to an inferno. I like it. So, wow.
I mean, a good inferno, not the bad one.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. The forge. We're forging good men. So,
so I think that would be helpful, so that, we've got some stuff now to chew on and work on and implement that you gave us. And, once we kind of do this, it'd be nice to be able to, kind of increase our skills and our knowledge base so that we can either translate that or have things here that they can attend as well. So,
yeah. Well, that's great information and encouragement for me to be out and about across the state. I want to do more of that in the coming months. We've got, as we record this, it's the Friday before our final conference, and so we'll be finishing up conference season and moving on to post-conference engagement with local churches across the state. So I hope to see you again soon. But Billy, thanks.
You will.
Thanks so much for your time here. Any final words for guys who may be in your place where they're maybe as a husband or a father or even as a men's ministry leader? What's some final encouragement for these guys?
Well, a lot of things I tell gentlemen that I meet that are not in men's ministry is that I realize you may be in a couples group or some other type of small group, but there is something very special about a men's only or a women's only ministry group.
Yep.
There's a level of vulnerability for guys to get in the room and share each other's burdens is a powerful thing, and we all need it.
Absolutely. I'll close with this. I've got a friend who used to say that a burden shared is half the burden. So when somebody else can take part of your burden, and a joy shared is twice the joy. And so it's funny how God's math works. I appreciate that. So, well, Billy, thanks.
One thing I always point to as well, one more thing, is obviously that verse in Mark 2 where they're lowering the paralytic down through the roof, right? And it's he's got a guy carrying each corner of his mat, and Jesus heals him, but he says because of the faith of his friends, because of their faith. So there's times when we're too weak to carry ourselves to him, and you better have some guys in your corner carrying the corners of your mat. So,
amen. That's right. Who's carrying your litter is one of those terms. So I love it. Well, Billy, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for the privilege of being able to sit down with you and record this conversation and share it with some guys. I know it'll be an inspiration to some men. And you've just encouraged me greatly by your vulnerability here and by your leadership of men at Parkway and your enthusiasm for that. So I look forward to staying in touch. And
Absolutely.
Well, folks, thanks for joining us for another episode of the Noble Man Podcast. And check in again. We'll have another fun guest, and we'll just continue to do the work of serving churches as they equip men to walk with Christ and lead well. God bless you, folks. Bye-bye.